Hey, this is Jen, your functional health practitioner and expert, and this week I'm talking to you guys about this whole huge coconut oil controversy that's been all over the media lately. Now, I'm not one to get political, but if there was ever a such thing as fake news, this would definitely take the cake. I mean, ever since the American Health Association just recently released its latest report in June, talking about its recommendations for avoiding saturated fats and listing coconut oil as one of those things to avoid, the media has been creating all kinds of myths and a frenzy over this, and I want to debunk some of those myths for you this week. So there's so much that I can say in regards to this. I'm going to break it down in some simple, easy facts for you guys to digest, and I want to give you some recommendations for how and why you should actually be consuming saturated fats in the right kind of way. So first of all, let's talk about the American Heart Association's report that they just recently released. Now, the American Heart Association has always recommended staying away from saturated fats. This has been their anthem for a really, really long time, and it's just recently in this latest report that they also listed coconut oil as one of those saturated fats that you should be staying away from. Now, there's all different kinds of things that can be wrong with this, and I'm going to simplify this in the three main parts that I picked out from this report that I feel are reasons why maybe we shouldn't be taking this information to heart, so to speak. So let's really break this down. So first of all, let's look at where the American Heart Association got their data from. So the American Heart Association has pulled their data that they've based their recommendations on avoiding saturated fats from 4 studies that they deemed to perform exceptionally well. Now, mind you, there are over 17 different studies that they could have chosen from, all related to saturated fats, but they chose these 4 because they deemed them to perform exceptionally well. Now, we don't really know what is deeming it exceptionally well, performing exceptionally well, mean in the first place. That sounds very questionable to me, just to begin with. Second of all, these 4 studies that they chose, all of this data and information was actually published back in 1968 all the way through 1979, so over 40 years ago. So they're basing their recommendations on information that is old and outdated. I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot has changed in the last 40 plus years, and technology has changed, and we just have so much more information at our fingertips now. It makes no sense to me as to why they're basing this report and their recommendations on information that's over 40 years old. So that's the first problem that I have with some of these recommendations that they have put out there. The second one is, let's really discuss what is, the root of heart disease in the first place. Is it saturated fats? Absolutely not. So we have to ask ourselves the question of what is causing heart disease to rise in the first place? If the American Heart Association's recommendations are right and people are reading that and starting to abide by that, why do we have more people suffering from heart disease than ever before? And the answer to this question is inflammation. Inflammation is essentially the root of all disease, and if you want to take it one layer further, you can say that chronic stress is actually the root of inflammation, and that is the root of all disease. So what happens is that when our body is experiencing chronic inflammation over a period of time, this damages cellular structures and also the artery walls. And when that's happening, the body is then going around looking to repair these things. Well, guess what it uses for repair? It uses cholesterol and plaque to repair our artery walls. So the more inflammation that we have, the more cellular damage and artery wall destruction there is, the more cholesterol and plaque the body is going to make to go and repair that. You can kind of think of cholesterol as like the repair that you would use to maybe repair a hole in a pipe or a tire. It's the same kind of concept. That's what your body is using it for. So if we were to abide by guidelines about eating an anti-inflammatory diet, then we would be reducing inflammation, we would be reducing the need for cholesterol and the repair that needs to happen, and overall promoting better health and reducing the risk of other diseases, since inflammation is the root of all other diseases as well. Now the third part, and the big one that I find is, just kind of backwards about their recommendations, are the substitutions that they're recommending. So they're telling you to stay away from saturated fats and things like coconut oil, and they're asking you to replace those things with polyunsaturated fats and oils that are derived from canola oil, corn oil, and soybean oil. Now, let's look at these types of oils. I mean, these oils themselves are highly inflammatory and put you at way bigger risk than consuming coconut oil on a regular basis. Over 90% of corn and soy products are genetically modified, meaning that they are laden with pesticides and herbicides. And when we consume those things in our body, those things become extremely inflammatory for us. In addition to that, there was also a Norwegian study that was recently published that shows that American crops, particularly corn and soy, that are genetically modified contain extreme values of something called glyphosate, which is an ingredient that's found in Roundup. Yes, that's weed killer that's found in Roundup, that's actually in our food. It's not on the outside of our food, it's inside of our food. So if we're now substituting our healthy coconut oil for things like soybean oil or canola oil or corn oil, we are now consuming pesticides and herbicides as well as glyphosate from Roundup that's going to drive up inflammation. So these things all drive up inflammation, and what happens when we have inflammation? More cellular damage, more artery wall repair that needs to happen, and cholesterol goes up. So those are three big main reasons as to why we probably shouldn't be taking the American Heart Association's report to heart so much. Now let's talk about why coconut oil actually is healthy for you and why it's important to consume saturated fats. So actually, saturated fats are essential from every function in our body, from our liver function to our immune system regulation. Our cell membranes are made up of 50% saturated fat. We need saturated fats and LDL cholesterol to actually make hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So oftentimes when I see people on a low-fat diet, their hormone production is suffering also in addition to that. And then also saturated fats are used to protect our liver from prescription medications, from the damage that is ensued from that, as well as they're used to create the lining of our lungs. And also saturated fats are essential in order for us to absorb and utilize calcium to make strong bones. So saturated fat here is not necessarily the enemy. We want to be consuming saturated fats, but we want to be consuming them in the right way. And when we do that, that means that we're actually going to boost other aspects of our health and our hormones. Now, consuming coconut oil is a healthy way to actually get in saturated fats, and also you can get in good healthy saturated fats through organic grass-fed meats and things like that as well, like grass-fed ground beef, for example. Now, in addition to being a source of healthy saturated fats, coconut oil also has some other benefits to it. It has antimicrobial properties, meaning that it protects our gut and our mouth from parasites, bacteria, and yeast overgrowth, while at the same time promoting good balance of beneficial flora in our gut. Now, I said it's important to make sure that you're consuming, saturated fats in the right way. So I want to give you guys some guidelines for how do you consume saturated fats in that right way that is actually healthy for you. So the first thing is that whenever you're consuming saturated fats, you want to make sure that they are organic and that they're non-GMO, so that they don't have any added hormones or added pesticides or herbicides that are going to drive up inflammation. Remember, we want to avoid that. You also want to make sure that your oils are cold pressed. So you often see this on like olive oil labels or coconut oil labels, and that means when they're cold pressed, that's the way that they process the oil. That helps to maintain the integrity and the structure of the oil so that it's at its healthiest form for you. When oils are not cold pressed, when they're hot pressed or warm pressed, it can denature the oil or ruin it, the cellular structure, which makes it a little less healthy for you in that regards. Now, the other thing is that if you're going to be getting saturated fats from, protein sources such as meats, you want to make sure that your meat is organic and grass-fed as well. If it's like some type of beef that you're consuming, consuming, or lamb or pig or whatever it might be, pork. And then if it's fish, you want to make sure that it's wild caught, again, so we can avoid any of those added hormones or chemicals and things like that that they might be coming across. Now the next thing is that you want to be eating an anti-inflammatory diet that is free of processed food and GMOs, like I kind of already mentioned, because remember, inflammation is the driving factor for heart disease. So if you really want to reduce your risk for heart disease and other conditions, then you want to be reducing inflammation and inflammatory factors, and your diet is one of the #1 ways that you can do that. And the last one is that you want to balance your consumption of omega-6s with omega-3s. So in the standard American diet, we have higher amounts of omega-6s, which are readily available to us, and we need omega-3s to balance that out. So taking an omega-3, like a fish oil supplement, can help to balance out your omega-3s. Now, those are some simple guidelines that you can follow when consuming saturated fats, and again, they are essential for you and your body for every single function of the body, so we just need to be eating them the right way. And you want to be taking some of this information that you hear in the media with a grain of salt. I always tell my clients that there's a difference between eating healthy and eating right for your body. Now, eating right for your body is going to always incorporate healthy foods, but not every healthy food is right for your body. So the best that you can do is receive the information, educate yourself about it, and check in with your body to understand what feels right to do that. Now, if you're interested in learning more about how to check in with your body and what is right for you, then I want to invite you to schedule a complimentary Ideal Health and Weight consultation with me by clicking on the link below or going back to the email where you found this video and blog. And I'd be happy to chat with you more about what that looks like for you. So I hope you guys found this helpful. You can go back to eating your beloved healthy coconut oil on a regular basis, and I will see you next week on the blog.